Now look, I get it. Talking about Pokémon Sword and Shield in 2024 is like beating a dead horse. Show is already over, get a move on. But I think this is the perfect time to look back on Sword and Shield and really see it for all that it was. It's been 5 years since the games were released, and since then, most of the controversy has died down for the most part. So I think this is a good time to ask, was Pokémon Sword and Shield really that bad? Believe it or not, my hatred for Sword and Shield is what initially jump-started my YouTube channel, so I already formed my opinion all the way back then. But that was Little Rogue. What about slightly less Little Rogue? If some of my opinions have changed since then, remember guys, that's a good thing. If you don't ever stop to question if you're right about something, you'll always be blind to the truth. It's fine to switch up. You're not permanently locked into a certain way of thinking. That's stupid. Everyone always hears about all the negatives Sword and Shield has to offer, and I don't want to start off the video on a bad note. So let's focus on what made this game great first before we dive any deeper into the controversies. Something I absolutely adored in Pokémon Sword and Shield was the character customization. For once, it didn't feel like I was dressing up my character as someone else. It felt like my character was someone else. Everyone looked super unique. No two trainers looked alike, and all the clothes we got to wear were really diverse. Seriously, just take a look at all of these. Everyone has their own sense of style that you can see reflected by their character. Here's mine. You can probably tell from the black, red, and blue. The one slight gripe I have is that you weren't able to change your gym challenge uniform, but that's okay. It only happened like 8 times, so after you were done with that, you never really saw it again. There were also a ton of hairstyles you could choose from, and a ton of different eyes too. Let's look at these funny ones. The thing I think they got absolutely perfect were the trainer models. They're exactly how I would envision Pokemon's art style to translate into 3D. They're bright and colorful, they look soft, they're expressive, and they retain that anime art style Pokemon has had for years. Seriously, this is a one-to-one port. It's perfect. Then came Scarlet and Violet and threw all of that out of the window. Just look at the uncanny valley we're in now. While yes, I loved Scarlet and Violet as games, they really missed the mark when it came to character models. This video is not about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet though, so more on that another day. I think the curry eating animation is enough to convince you why I love these models so much. They're so good and expressive. Look at them. They're so happy. The character designs were cool too. There's so many iconic designs in this game. Marnie's outfit and design just fits her perfectly. I love it. Alistair always looked super cool to me, especially because of the mask that he wears. Leon's outfit, while not particularly looking good, it's so loud and obnoxious that it's iconic. Sony has a laid-back vibe to her, which I really liked. And Bede looks like such an egotistical bitch, and I loved it. Please give us more rivals like him. I think you get the idea by now. They're all pretty awesome. At least most of them. Pokemon music is always incredible, and Sword and Shield did a really great job yet again. So many of the tracks are just ingrained in my brain. The Wild Encounter theme is awesome, but the first one I always immediately think of is the gym battle theme. It sounds so fucking cool. It tickles my brain every time. The electronic instruments are going crazy. I always thought it was super cool that when the gym leader finally Dynamaxes, that's when the beat drops and the crowd starts cheering. It's such a nice touch, and they really didn't have to do all that, but I'm glad they did. Marnie and Bede also have really great themes too. They're just so good, I can't explain it. Pops is a little more chill and happy sounding, and while I like Marnie's and Bede's theme better, this one's alright. It's not bad by any means. There aren't really a lot of town themes that really stuck out to me though. I mean, they're good, they fit the town that they belong to. What I'm trying to say is that there's no Driftvale City equivalent. Like, I don't hear a song and I'm like, oh my god, this is going on my playlist. It's just, you know, fits the theme. A lot of these songs I don't even remember, if I'm being honest. I do have to say this again though, because someone's gonna try and twist my words. The songs aren't bad. I don't hate them. Hell, even if I did, my opinion shouldn't matter to you. I'm just some fucking guy on the internet. Who cares? I think that Sword and Shield's UI was actually pretty good. Just look at these menus. I like how stylized everything is and how easy it is to navigate. It actually does it better than Scarlet and Violet. I feel like I'm always getting lost using those menus. They also just aren't exactly stylized. They're pretty bare bones. Not bad by any means, but not wow, you know? The DLC was really the shining star of the whole Sword and Shield experience. This was the first time Pokemon has ever done DLC, so a lot of people didn't really know how to feel, but I think it was a major success. The story in the Isle of Armor, while short, was enjoyable, and I did really like Clara's character. Her toxicness was a nice change of pace from all the generic happy-go-lucky rivals we get nowadays. Oh yeah, also there's Avery. No one really cares about Avery. The first DLC, the Isle of Armor, gives you access to a new wild area, older Pokemon, a few new features for quality of life, and that's about it. I didn't do a great job of explaining it, I know, but I did really enjoy it. The new songs were really great too, mostly Clara's theme. I love her theme so much. The Crown Tundra is what people consider the better of the two DLCs, mostly because of max raid duns. You could catch legendary Pokemon in there, shiny hunt, and it was just overall really fun. It added a ton of replayability. There was also a short story and a new place to explore, but if I'm being honest, I still haven't finished the DLC entirely. But from what I've played, I love Peony. He's such a funny character, and I love his dynamic with his daughter. Also, I'm like pretty sure that's Penny's dad. I don't know if it's been officially confirmed. It probably has been, but that's Penny's dad, and her dad's cool. What Sword and Shield lacked was a better post-game, and these DLCs really did add a lot of replayability, so I'm really grateful for that. Overall, the characters in the base game, the Isle of Armor, and the DLC were all super fun, and I love them all. Marnie, Bede, Hop, Leon, Sonia, Peony, Peonia, that old guy from the Isle of Armor, Clara, Alistair, hell, even Bald Guy. They're all great. I think this is the Pokemon game with the most amount of characters that I like. A lot of the new Pokemon introduced in this generation were really cool too. Well, yeah, there weren't a lot of new ones. The ones they did add are instant staples. I love the starters. Corviknight is cool, Hatterene too, Grimmsnarl's awesome, Alcremie is a cool concept. I love Applin and its evolutions, the Galarian form Pokemon too. I could go on and on. They're just all really great. I can't really think of any bad designs if I'm being honest. Let me think. I didn't like Boltund that much. I felt like Yamper was a lot cuter. And it's not bad. I really can't think of any. Actually, no, never mind. The fucking, what's his name? Braxcalibur? That stupid fuck with a giant crown hat. I hate him. But other than that, they're cool. The world was pretty fun to explore. One big gripe that I had was not being able to move the camera, but I got used to it. And plus they let you do it in the wild area, but more on that later. I also just hated that you couldn't enter people's homes anymore, which saying that out loud kind of makes me sound like a monster. Please don't put me on a watch list. I feel like it wouldn't have been too hard to add since most of the time, houses in the Pokemon world are just rooms in a dark void, but oh well. A lot of the cities and towns were really pretty. There were tons of memorable locations scattered around the map. Hammerlock looks so fucking cool. I love the architecture. That one forest place with the glowing mushrooms, that was really beautiful. Of course, the wild area, which again, more on that later. Then we have the ghetto. Yeah, it's pretty much just the ghetto of Galar. They don't even have their own stadium. What the hell, Chairman Rose? And while the map is pretty linear, I mean, just look at it. It's just a straight line to the Pokemon League. Let's not lie to ourselves. Pokemon has always been pretty linear when it comes to exploration. They just usually hide it way better than just having a straight line to travel across. And for what it's worth, I do think the map is better than Scarlet and Violet's. The one in that game just felt really barren, and some towns didn't really feel like towns. Again, I just want to say, I love Scarlet and Violet. Probably the most fun I've had playing a Pokemon game in a very long time. The game has some flaws, man. I'm not gonna be biased and say it was perfect. No game is. Okay, maybe one. While the wild area wasn't as big as I wanted it to be, I did really like exploring there. I wish more of them were scattered throughout the region. Scarlet and Violet, of course, expanded upon this and made the entire region essentially one big wild area. And I loved it so much. So I hope they do that again one day. I think they did a better job with it in Legends Arceus. However, again, I hated how barren it felt to explore. There was nothing out there. And it makes sense because it was a long time ago, but still. The raid dens were also really fun to partake in. I spent a lot of time battling in those, grinding for items and whatnot. And whenever I would see a shiny, it was really satisfying. What I can really appreciate is that Sword and Shield made it super easy to get into competitive Pokemon. They introduced nature mints, which could change your Pokemon's nature. They made it easier to get bottle caps, which can max out your Pokemon's IVs, and EV training was made super simple. And by super simple, I mean you could just go into your settings and just change the time, but still super simple. You could also easily level up your Pokemon with rare candies, which in the main story, yeah, it's kind of lame. Don't do that, please. But in the post game, when you're just trying to assemble a really strong team, it's really convenient. You have all the tools to raise your competitive teams to the potential that you want. In older games, it was extremely time consuming, so not a lot of people invested that time in, and they cheated. But thankfully now it's super simple and easy. People still cheat though. Pretty lame. A lot of the features are pretty charming, and the game is fun, but I mean, all Pokemon games are. It just didn't live up to our expectations, and it was also just sad seeing Game Freak cut corners where they didn't need to. This isn't really specific to Sword and Shield, since in every game you can shiny hunt, but shiny hunting was pretty fun here. I do prefer the idea of a daycare rather than having a picnic. I don't know why Scarlet and Violet did that. They just kind of overcomplicated things. Having access to your PC box is such a game-changing quality of life feature that I'm super happy Sword and Shield brought. You didn't have to make useless trips to your PC anymore, and if you were the type of player who liked using more than just a base party, you could switch out whenever you want. It was just perfect. Something I didn't know I needed to be grateful for was fast box loading. Whenever you're cycling through boxes, there's no wait time. And I mean, why would there be? They're just a bunch of sprites. But in Scarlet and Violet, there is a wait time, and you just have to sit there and wait until it loads. And I genuinely cannot fathom why this happens. Pokemon are kilobytes of data. Literal kilobytes. There's no reason they should be taking you a while to load. That's absurd. They did later go on to fix this in a patch update though, so thank God. I think the Pokemon camp feature was pretty cute. It was fun seeing your Pokemon just play around and whatnot. I didn't use it that much on my adventure because I thought it was just a Pokemon me without being able to pet your Pokemon, but I wish I did use it more. Because seriously, just look at this. It's adorable. Making curry was pretty fun too. Although I do hate that it's super hard to fuck up curry. Like, I genuinely tried my best to burn it and it just wouldn't burn. So it kind of makes the good curry I make feel less rewarding. That's pretty much all the good things I had to say about Pokemon Sword and Shield, but it's time for all the negatives. Just what about these games made them so hated? One of the biggest criticisms Sword and Shield faces are its graphics, and yeah, they can be pretty rough around the edges. I know I praised the character models earlier, and I don't take back any of what I said. They did a great job. What people mainly refer to are the environments. To put it bluntly, they looked horrible, and still kinda do. I think the main thing that made it look so terrible is that they tried to go for a detailed look, but they couldn't make it too realistic or else it would look really strange, so they made it lower quality to try and blend things in, but now it just looks like shit. At least I'm assuming that's what happened. It could just be that they genuinely made horrible textures and didn't bother fixing them, but there's no way, right? Like, this had to have been intentional. I feel like I could do a better job, but nobody really knows what exactly happened. I do think though that if they went for a more cartoony, vibrant look, the game would look leagues better than what it does now, and the majority of people wouldn't really complain. Don't wash out the colors, embrace them. Now, graphics aren't that important to me. I honestly don't care how the game looks, just as long as it's fun. But when they do cut a lot of corners in Sword and Shield and the game's still lacking in a lot of areas, it just kind of feels like a big fuck you. Much like the graphics, the animations in Sword and Shield are one of the major complaints, and I think that those complaints are justified. A lot of the animations are just Pokemon sliding around or hopping or some laser beam coming out of thin air. Even in cutscenes, they don't even bother animating them. Like, what the hell is this? Genuinely, what is this? This is a AAA game? Are you serious? It's just disappointing in every way possible. I understand that creating animations for every single Pokemon out there is a huge task. Don't get me wrong, but they didn't need to create any new models or anything, so the majority of their time could have gone to animations. They've remained the same since X and Y, which was almost 10 years ago. You would think by then they'd be able to take some time and make some animations that actually look good. They could also just reuse them. I just don't like how static the Pokemon look. And judging by how unpolished the game feels, it really makes me wonder where most of the development time went. I understand that game development takes time, and sometimes you gotta make sacrifices. And they claim that getting rid of most of the Pokemon was so that they had time to give the Pokemon that were in the game better animations. But this was just a straight up lie.
But with the transition to the Nintendo Switch hardware, with its, it being much more powerful, allowing us to be much more expressive with each of the individual Pokemon.
And this is the biggest controversy I think we've ever seen in the Pokemon community. The Pokedex in Sword and Shield was cut almost in half, maybe more. And people were not happy. I sure as hell wasn't. The incompetence of Game Freak. Holy fucking shit, dude. I woke up and immediately started swinging. I ruined all my chances of a sponsor day one. In every Pokemon game before this, you were able to use all of your beloved Pokemon, at least in the post-game, which makes sense. I don't see why they would cut them, you know? I'm really confused though, because I had originally thought that this was because most of the 3D models needed to be made, but they were already made. They've been using the same models from X and Y. And the second excuse was, oh, they just needed time to make the animations. But the animations they're not there. And to make matters worse, they didn't give it back to us in a free update. It was locked behind a paywall. Why? It just felt really scummy. Not only did they lie about improving the game quality, not only did they lie about the reasoning, but now they're trying to monetize their laziness. It just felt like being in an abusive relationship. What the hell? They do the bare minimum and then try to mask it as something rewarding afterwards. With Pokemon taking the jump to the big boy console, I thought it would have been the perfect time to introduce voice acting. You would think since Zelda had done that, now would be the perfect time for Pokemon to do it too, right? It's not even strange for Pokemon to have voice acting. The anime has been around for as long as the series has, but no, we still have no voice acting. Even in Scarlet and Violet, it makes a lot of scenes where there's supposed to be a character talking look extremely awkward and cringy, and I hate it. I think it's most noticeable in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Again, this video is not about that, but it just reinforces this idea. Some of the scenes in that game were really sad, but I couldn't really feel much because there just wasn't a voice attached. There wasn't any emotion. It just felt strange. I'm not saying every piece of dialogue needs to be voiced, just the story related ones. I mean, just look at some of these scenes. They're terrible. According to the Game Freak leaks, Legends Arceus was supposed to finally add voice acting, but I guess they changed their minds?
Yeah.
I hope Legends ZA finally adds this feature because it's been long overdue. The game also just feels really unoptimized. There's no reason a Pokemon should have to be right in front of me in order to appear. That's absurd. I know a ton of people give Scarlet and Violet shit for running poorly, which is justified, but those very same people let Sword and Shield slide, which is just really dumb and hypocritical. They're both guilty of the same thing. I love Scarlet and Violet, but I can admit when the game has faults, and this is one of its major faults. I remember in Sword and Shield, my game would run so poorly if more than just a few Pokemon showed up on my screen at a time, and I hated riding my bike a little too fast just for a whole Onix to show up and stop me in my tracks. And no, this isn't the fault of the Switch. There are plenty of games that have way more going on, and you can see enemies from really far away just fine. This is all Game Freak's fault for not optimizing their game. I think what the problem might be is that they don't have low poly versions of every Pokemon model. Typically in games, the further you are from something, the less polygons it has, so it doesn't have to put so much strain on your game. But I think Sword and Shield just tries to render it all at once and can't keep up. Even then though, I don't think that's what's going on, since in the Pokemon camp, you have your entire party there and it runs just fine. So what exactly about the overworld makes it so terrible? It's not very graphically impressive, so it can't be that. It's just really confusing. Maybe it's the grass, to be honest. Sword and Shield's story was horrible, and that's putting it lightly. It was just extremely anticlimactic. I genuinely thought that the climax was the rising action of the game, and things were gonna get heated up afterwards, but no. It was just downhill from there, and everything de-escalated into nothing. I guess maybe if you had low expectations, the story would be cool, but the problem that I have is that they were hyping everything up leading to the climax. They were making the darkest day sound like an apocalyptic event, something that would have catastrophic events all around the region. I was sort of thinking something like the Ultra Beast, just traveling back to the previous parts of the region to stop something, but then it's over in like 30 minutes. Cool, I guess. I also just hated how often Leon took the spotlight. Anytime there was a conflict in old Pokemon games, you had to be the one to stop it, which makes sense. You're the main character and this is a video game. There wouldn't be much of a game if there's nothing to do, but now Leon is just doing everything for you. It honestly just feels like they had planned for the player to do most of these things, but they ran out of time and retconned it so Leon did them instead off screen. I do really like Hop's story though. I think he's a horrible rival, but a great character. Let me say that again. I think he's a horrible rival, but a great character. You hear that? Do you have ears? I'm checking. I said something very similar, if not the same, in a previous video, and so many sensitive Hop fans were just, oh my god, you hate him? I didn't fucking say that. I didn't say that. Do you have ears? Do you have them? Why do you have ears if you don't use them? Why do you have ears if you don't fucking use them? Anyways, back to Hop. Sometimes in life, you want something, but you just can't achieve it, no matter how hard you try. And that's okay. You just gotta find something that's right for you. Something that you can excel at. You don't have to follow in anyone's footsteps. I forget that Team Yell exists time and time again. And that's because they quite literally do nothing the entire goddamn fucking game. What was the point of making them if they're just gonna be a bunch of bench warmers? They're just Marnie's fans. And while that's a cool idea, I just feel like they didn't do enough in the story. They did like 2 big stunts and then just quit because Marnie was like, hey guys, stop. Okay. It would have been really cool to see them do more and more obnoxious things, all for the sake of spreading Marnie's name, and the world starting to hate Marnie for their actions. Marnie tells them please stop, and they turn against Marnie, seeing it as their idol, not appreciating their fans or something, and basically having them ramp up their rampage even more. Marnie, as a result, shutting herself out from the world, feeling like everyone hates her, even those who once supported her. I know in the context of the story it doesn't make sense, since they want her to succeed so they get out of the hood, but they could just rewrite it to make it make sense. I just wanted to see more of them, okay? Maybe it could end with Marnie having some speech at the Pokemon League for the world to see that she doesn't like her fans acting obnoxious, redeeming herself in the process. Just an idea. I'm throwing darts at a dartboard here. Also, just one more thing. They could have made it like a plot twist. Like the entire game, it seems like Marnie's like this corrupted like piece of shit, only adding to the world's hatred towards her. But then you confront her and you realize that she didn't want any of this. It would have made for a really nice plot twist. It's no secret Pokemon games have been getting easier, but Sword and Shield are extremely easy. It's basically just press A and win simulator, which is why I usually intentionally play with my party underleveled so that every battle's a challenge. But when I stream the game to you people, you're wondering why I'm getting my ass kicked. That's the point! I want a challenge! If I level my Pokemon up anymore, I can just press A and win, and I don't want that. I think with enough strategy, you can win, even despite the level difference, and it feels super satisfying afterwards. Anyways, they hype up Leon to be this unstoppable trainer, the best of the best the world's ever seen. So it just feels like a complete fumble that his battle didn't reflect that at all. Pierce's Pokemon were EV trained, so I would have liked to see Leon's team be EV trained as well. Just something to make his fight seem more memorable. You can't just hype him up just for him to be nothing. It's the exact same thing they did for the story. It just all feels so anticlimactic. All that build up just to do nothing with it. That's the main reason I just don't like Sword and Shield. The DLC allowed the player to walk around in the wild area with their Pokemon following them, which on paper sounds like a great idea, right? Everyone has been asking for this since forever ago, and now we finally have it. Here's the catch though. The Pokemon speed doesn't match the player's speed. So you either have a really slow Pokemon who can't even keep up with you and is just in this endless cycle of teleporting you, or you have a Pokemon that's too fast and catches up to you in 2 steps and stops and does that over and over again, and it's super nauseating. I feel like it was more work to implement every Pokemon speed instead of just having all of them at a fixed one. So why did they decide to do this? I don't know. Like, they had to have playtested it. There's no way. There's no way they thought this was fine. This was also the first Pokemon game that cost a full $60. And on top of that, they had the DLC that was repackaged stuff. So it was in total $90. So if a $90 game has even less features than what was present on a $40 game on older hardware, of course people are going to be mad. People were spending more money on arguably a worse product. And I do think this was kind of a shitty thing to do. I don't think the games should be lower price, but if they are going to cost more, I feel like the games shouldn't be looking like this, you know? And selling us older Pokemon is such a bitch move, especially after claiming that the reason they got rid of it was because they wanted to improve animations, which was just a lie. And by the way, no, they didn't make the walking animations this generation either. Those have been there since Sun and Moon in the game files, maybe even before that. It made Game Freak seem like such a shady company. How are we supposed to have good faith in a company that constantly lies to us? Which, to be fair, is most companies, but at least they do a better job at lying. Anyone with eyes can see that nothing changed. The online for what it was kind of terrible. For some strange reason, you had stamps to let people know what others were doing. Why? I don't know. You can't even interact with most of them. Yeah, it was cool if you had friends and this would show up, but why would it tell me about random people? Also, for some reason, they had real players walk around in the wild area, but they're more or less just ghosts. It's not real time, and you can't even interact with them. Scarlet and Violet later improved this way more, which I love, but I still don't understand what the point of it was in Sword and Shield. People also disliked all of the removed features from previous games. Mega Evolutions and Z moves are no longer usable. The ability to turn off EXP share is just completely gone, and the GTS is just straight up gone unless you want to use the shitty mobile app, which I don't really see the point in. I can live without Mega Evolution and Z moves since I feel like they were really niche, even if they were cool, but the other two had no reason to be gone. Some people just don't like using the EXP share to give themselves more of a challenge, which the game is in desperate need of, and it would have been really simple to just implement, but they still chose not to do it. We have mediocre graphics, horrible animations, no voice acting, a bad story, a lot of missing features. What the hell happened? By no means was this game the greatest Pokemon game ever, but it wasn't bad per se. I know we all have a ton of complaints about it, but that's from a die-hard Pokemon's fan point of view. To your average person, or someone who hasn't played many other Pokemon games, this game is perfectly fine, and I can see why someone would love this game. Do I think it's worthy of a 9.3 star rating? Hell no. While not a bad game, again, I do think it's one of the weaker, if not the weakest Pokemon game out there, going by modern standards anyway. It wouldn't be fair to judge Pokemon Red and Blue using modern day standards, because they would just suck, I'm sorry. We judged them based on the time they came out. Red and Blue had nothing else to compare it to, so it was great for the time being. But Sword and Shield has so many Pokemon games to compare it to, and in many regards, it's lacking. It's just not up to par with them. I can see why you would love this game though, especially if it's one of your first Pokemon games. I mostly just think that these games were really bland and didn't really try to innovate much. Instead of building on the Pokemon formula, it seems like they watered it down and just spoon-fed it to us. And whether that was because of laziness or time constraints, the results were still the same. The only real innovation this game had was the wild area, but it was still lacking in a lot of ways. Thankfully though, it did set the groundwork for Scarlet and Violet, and I really like the open world in that game. Even if it can be buggy and it is pretty barren, it was pretty fun seeing new Pokemon in new areas. I honestly think the biggest problem Pokemon faces is making every game from scratch every time. This just isn't viable, especially for these new style of games. Older Pokemon games used engines from the previous game. Fire Red and Leaf Green use the same engine as Ruby and Sapphire. Heart Gold and Soul Silver use the same engine as Diamond and Pearl. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire use the same engine as X and Y. And as a result, they didn't have to spend so much development time creating an engine from the ground up. They could focus on making whatever new things or ideas they wanted to add. But every Switch game is completely different from each other. So oftentimes, the games just feel so rushed and unfinished. If they just used the previous game's engine, this would not only make the fans happier by giving them a more polished and refined game, this would also lessen the workload for Game Freak employees. Everyone wins. At the end of the day, I do have a lot of fond memories of this game. And looking back at it, I do think we were a bit harsh. That didn't come from a place of malice though. We just wanted to see our favorite franchise strive to become better. I know I did shit on the graphics a lot in this video, but truthfully, the games don't look that bad. Like, if I saw this, I wouldn't really be like, oh my god, what the hell? It's just a combination of the game being so lacking and also the graphics being lacking. It just makes me mad. While I do think some of the textures are pretty terrible and the animations are really bad, I have no defense for that. For a Pokemon game on the Switch, I think it gets the job done. In no way is it mind-blowing, but it's not bad. I think we were just so focused on how the game looked because we just felt like the game lacked a lot, and we were just looking to complain about anything at that point. We were tired, man. We wanted more. And I mean, most of the controversy only started after they announced they're cutting the decks. And to be fair, I think it was Game Freak's fault, because this all started after they said they were cutting the decks for the sole purpose of having higher quality animations and making the game look better. But when we did see the game, it looked like that, and it just didn't completely justify the reason for cutting the decks. So I do think they dug their own grave with that one. Despite all of the problems though, I think Game Freak has been doing a way better job recently. Maybe our cries for help did work. They're taking a lot longer with Legend ZA. Hell, we don't even know what the game looks like, and I really don't mind. They can take as long as they need to, and I think most fans agree with that. As long as the game comes out great, I don't care how long it takes. I'm really happy that they're taking that time. It's good for everyone. However, the unfortunate reality is if they take too long, fans will start expecting impossible things. Like, for example, when GTA 6 does finally come out, I know for a fact people are going to be dogging on every little thing they can find in that game, which, to be fair, it has been like 10 years or something, so you know, it's a lot to live up to. I think if you were to play the games again, they aren't as bad as many people make it out to be. Again, I would in no way put this in my top 10 favorite Pokemon games, but I do like Sword and Shield for what it was. While there are a lot of things I wish were executed better, the game isn't bad by any means. And again, I just want to say this video isn't here to attack people who like Sword and Shield. It's actually the complete opposite. It's also not meant to spark anything. It's just an honest, unbiased look back on Sword and Shield. I think most of the hatred we all feel comes from the community. Like, I feel like if I just played this game isolated from society, I wouldn't have as big of a problem as I do with it. I don't think my perception of the story would have changed though. That shit is just genuinely terrible and I can't excuse it. How do you go from Sun and Moon having one of the best stories in a Pokemon game to this? Seriously, what the fuck? Anyways, let me know what you guys all think in the comments. I think I'm sick or something. Subscribe, like the video, comment, follow my socials. Shield players really had it rough, huh? Later.